Let's move to our TaskQueue container.h. We are going to start with a load function, load file function right here. We'll do value tree load file from disk, and it takes a file named f. And we are going to have a function that does what, let's see, what am I looking for here? We're going to have a function that does what this root item.reset does and tree.setRootItem do. So we'll add a void reset tree root file f. Let's give it a default file in case for some reason maybe we can use this to just initialize the this is like a way that we'll tell it that we need to load up the default tree or something like that. Maybe that's the way we can signal it, by just not passing in an argument. Or if the file that we're trying to load on disk doesn't exist, something like that maybe. And then let's add a function we can call during construction that will link this guy with this guy. So that will be void load tree. So that means that our first steps are going to be to comment out this right here, the root item.reset. We're going to get rid of that. We're going to get rid of this tree .reset root item. This one gets commented out as well. Instead, we are going to call our load tree function. Now let's go down here to the bottom after our create tree and our timer callback. And we are going to start on this load tree function. So let's stub it out. Void TaskQueue container load tree. Now it would be good to generalize the process of loading settings from a value tree. And we did this in main, so let's refactor. That was this stuff down here where we load settings from disk right here. This stuff where we load the file from disk and then we extract a value tree from that file. Hopefully if we did it successfully, then we can use it. All right, so this is what, let's generalize this. So let's go to our utilities.h and we'll add some more stuff down here. Let's add a value tree, load tree from disk, f. And then let's copy what we had in our main and revise it a little bit. That would be this stuff right here. All right, so we'll just copy this. We'll paste it down here at the bottom. And we'll make this return load tree from disk. So we'll change this to be load tree from disk file f. Let's see, we wanted to return a value tree. Now the part that we want is not this get settings file. We can get rid of that. What we want is this if f.exists file. Then from there we can do the same, create a file input stream, read it as a string using the value tree from XML static function. And then if we have a valid tree, we can just return that tree. And that means we don't need any of this stuff here. If we do not have a valid tree, this was where we would jassert false and leave ourselves a little message. Error, couldn't load file as a value tree. Let's clean that up. Get rid of this guy, and we'll do the same thing here. jassert error, couldn't load file. So this is a big problem. And then from here we can just return a default value tree like that. All right, now let's refactor our stuff in main to take advantage of these new classes. That's this part right here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to keep this line, auto settings equals get settings file. Let me just comment this out first. And now we can say settings, we have our settings value tree equals load tree from disk settings file. Right, and now we can say, now we just need to make sure jassert settings.is valid. You know, if this triggers a jassert because of how it's implemented here, if we hit this and we hit this, we know we're going to get a garbage value tree. And that means that we can then do the same things we did here. We can take this line and we can basically just copy all of this and keep that all the same. So let's just copy this and paste it there. That should be okay. Let's see what we have. Load settings from disk. Let's see. Here we pull it from here. Here we check if it's valid. We can do the same. Make sure we have an X. Make sure we have a W, a width, and a height property. Otherwise, default back to these. That's fine. If we're cool with our, if our settings was cool, then we can do this. We can grab those and then call our set bounds. Okay, that's fine. And that's also fine. Okay, great. So that's a solid refactor. And while we are doing all of this stuff, let's generalize the whole process of saving a value tree to disk. Let's go back to our utilities. Toss this guy down here. Void save tree to disk. The value tree we're going to save. Oh, let me put the right fingers on the right keys. Value tree, VT, and then file F. Now this is going to be pretty simple because we can borrow from what we did earlier in main. That was the settings file.replace with text, that thing right there. We can do that same thing here. Similar approach to that. Void save tree to disk. Value tree VT. File F. Now we can do if this file doesn't exist, we should probably create it. So we'll just check for that first, and then we can do the whole replace with text thing. So if file, if f.exists as file. If it doesn't exist, that's what that exclamation point is. Let's let ourselves know f.get full path name does not exist. Give ourselves a little alert message. And if it does exist, f.replace with text. And vt.toXML string like that. Right. If it doesn't exist, we should clearly create it. f.create. And eventually we will remove this, but f.reveal to user. So for me, it's always nice to know that this actually worked correctly, and then I can actually look at it. So let's go back to main, and we're gonna generalize our save settings to disk. And is there anywhere else where we write this stuff? I think that's the only place. Okay, so we don't need our settings file. Instead, get rid of this. Instead, we can just do save tree to disk, and we're gonna write our settings. And we're gonna write our, we're gonna use just get settings file. How simple is that? Okay, let's go back to our TaskQueue container. Now we can use our stuff. So we can do auto settings file equals get settings file. Well, need to include utilities first. Let's put that up here. Include utilities.h. All right, back down we go. Now we can do auto settings equals get settings file. Like that. Let me make sure we don't have any errors. Do a quick build. It should compile just fine. Oh, use of settings file. Oh, that should be F, not settings file. There we go. Okay. Moving on. All right, auto settings equals get settings file. Now that we have our settings, now we can say auto settings equals load tree from disk. Settings. Oh, this should say auto settings file. Like that. If settings is valid, always got to check if it's valid. Let's check if it has that current file property. If settings dot has property current file, we can do some cool stuff. Else do some other cool stuff. Okay. So let's grab the current file. We'll do file. Let's see, file. What does this want? This wants a string to an absolute path. So we will do settings current file dot toString. We'll give it our name. Current file. Let's make sure it exists. Assert current file dot exists as file. And then we can call, now that we have a file to reset our tree root with, we can do reset tree root current file. And then down here, if we don't have this property, then let's just give ourselves a little pause. And we'll do this is where we would say, let's see, where was this? This is where we'll do this stuff, right? The part we just implemented is this. If current file property exists, load it from disk. All right, so now we're gonna do, well, let me just copy that over. We'll do this stuff. All right, so create our default task, save default task to that path. And then we will call, here we will call settings.setProperty current file. And then we'll use that path. We'll use this path right here. And then we can call load tree. Like that. If our settings are just totally invalid, this is the last part. If the settings that we loaded from disk are not valid, then we have a bigger problem. Debug settings. We need to alert ourselves about this. Settings file dot get full path name. Let's do this in all caps. Does not contain a valid value tree. JAssert false. So the issue that we were going to run into here is that this load tree is going to get loaded, and if we can't pull a file from settings, we're going to have a blank value tree. If this actually happens, and hopefully we'll never get here. This should only happen if we don't. This should only happen if we don't have any data on disk. So let's move over to. Let's see. Okay, actually, that means we don't need this guy right here, so we can get rid of that. And let's see. If we run this, it should hit the JAssert for our settings file not having this property. Let's see what happens. Oh, what am I missing? Reset tree root. Oh yes, we can't call that yet. So we'll just comment this out for right now. Okay, great. It does exactly as we expected. There was no property current file in our settings tree. Let's kill that. And let's implement our reset tree root function as the last thing that we'll do in this video. So void TaskQueue container reset tree root. This takes a file. And if f.exists as file, always got to check and make sure your files exist before you try to use them. Auto vt equals load tree from disk. If vt is valid. If we have a valid value tree, then we can reset, then we can root item dot reset. We can basically do what we did in our constructor. This root item dot reset, this thing right here. Except instead of calling create tree, we can pass it vt. And then we can do our tree.set root item get. And let's see, if our vt is not valid, let's do the same thing we did here. Else f does not contain a valid value tree, whatever file we pass in. If the file does not exist, else, we'll do this, whoops, let's just paste this here. Else f.get full path name does not exist. Okay, cool, let's build it. Oh, before we finish building it. Oh, that is uncommented, okay. All right, let's build it. We should hit this same JAssert as before. Okay, cool.